What if the voice inside your head is the one holding you back, not the world outside you? What if your biggest obstacle isn't lack of motivation, time or resources, but the words you silently repeat to yourself every single day? And what if your inner dialogue, the one you think no one hears, is the exact reason you keep sabotaging your progress, quitting too soon or playing small when you know damn well you were built for more? Most people never escape their own potential, not because they're lazy, not because they're broken, but because they've been trained to speak to themselves like victims instead of leaders. So here's the truth. Most will never tell you. Your mind is not just listening, it's obeying. Every time you say, I can't, every time you whisper, I'm not ready, every time you silently doubt yourself, you're building a reality that mirrors those beliefs. And the longer you speak limitation, the harder it becomes to believe impossibility. That's why for the next 3 days, I'm challenging you to interrupt that cycle. This isn't about positive thinking. This is about psychological reprogramming. You are going to learn how to talk to yourself with authority, clarity, and intention, because the words you choose become the reality you live. Your voice is not background noise. It's the code that writes your story. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you reclaim your power. You want to transform your results. Start with how you speak to yourself when no one else is around. This isn't a motivational speech, it's a mental intervention, because if you master your inner voice, you master your outcomes. Stay with me for the next few minutes, and by the end of this video, you won't just talk differently, you'll think sharper, move bolder, and lead yourself with a power you've never tapped into before. Jason grew up hearing things like, you're not cut out for, that don't get your hopes up, people like us don't get that far. He didn't know those words were writing invisible rules in his mind, rules he would later obey without even realizing it. He got good grades, but never raised his hand. He had ideas, but kept them quiet. He had ambition, but dimmed it around people who didn't dream big. Not because he lacked talent, but because he had inherited a language of limitation. And like most people, he never questioned it. Let me ask you something. How many of your daily decisions are controlled by words you didn't choose? How many dreams have you delayed? Not because you weren't ready, but because somewhere in your mind a sentence said, you're not enough. You don't have to be abused to be programmed. All it takes is repetition. One phrase repeated enough times becomes gospel to the subconscious mind. And what most people call low confidence is often just a script they never rewrote. The words you speak to yourself matter, but the words you silently accept matter even more. You see, your self-talk isn't just background noise. It's the software your brain runs on. It isn't commentary, it's code. And the subconscious doesn't judge that code. It doesn't debate it. It doesn't push back. It just executes. So if you keep telling yourself, I always mess things up, guess what? Your actions will find a way to make that true. But here's the turning point. Language is not destiny. It's a choice. You don't have to keep living by the same rules someone else installed. You can rewrite the script, and it starts with awareness. For the next 24 hours, I want you to listen to your inner dialogue like your future depends on it, because it does. Write down the phrases you catch yourself saying. Don't filter them. Don't justify them. Just record them. Because once you bring those words into the light, you rob them of their power to control you in the dark. Now here's where it gets powerful. For every phrase that limits you, I want you to rewrite it out loud and on paper. But don't just make it positive. Make it believable. Instead of I'm a failure, say I'm still learning how to win. Instead of I'm not good at this, say I'm training myself every day to improve. You see, transformation doesn't come from denial. It comes from direction. You're not trying to lie to yourself. You're installing new instructions. Your brain doesn't need a cheerleader. It needs a leader. And leaders don't wait for a permission to speak life. They speak it because they know their words build reality. Jason didn't become a new person overnight, but once he changed how he spoke to himself, everything else began to shift. He started raising his hand. He pitched the project. He asked for what he deserved, not because the world changed, but because the way he communicated with himself did. That's the lesson. You cannot create an extraordinary life with ordinary language. You must upgrade the way you speak to reflect the level you want to reach. Imagine walking into every situation and your inner voice says, we've got this, imagine facing fear and hearing yourself calmly declare, I know what this is. It's a sign I'm expanding. That kind of self-talk doesn't come from hype. It comes from habit. It's trained, it's deliberate, and it is one of the most powerful habits any human being can build. But here's the warning. If you don't rewire the words will rewire you. They'll lock you into patterns that don't reflect your potential. They'll convince you to shrink when you should be rising. And one day you'll look back and realize it wasn't life that held you back. It was language. So let me say this clearly. If you change your self-talk, you change your self-image. And when your self-image changes, everything else follows. Relationships shift, boundaries solidify, courage rises, discipline activates, because your mind stops acting like the scared version of you and starts becoming the leader you were always meant to be. For the next 3 days, treat your inner dialogue like sacred ground. Refuse to say anything to yourself you wouldn't say to someone you love. Replace criticism with correction. Replace doubt with direction. Replace shame with strategy. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be aware. You need to be intentional. And you need to be relentless in choosing words that align with who you're becoming, not who you were, because when your language changes, your energy changes. And when your energy changes, your actions follow. That is the real law of attraction. What you speak internally becomes what you attract externally. Jason learned that the hard way, but you don't have to. You can decide right now to lead your language. You can decide that from this moment on, your voice becomes your advantage, your words become your strategy, and your thoughts become your tools. Don't let another day go by speaking like you're weak when your spirit was built to be unshakable. Speak like someone who's building something, because you are. Your future is listening. Speak wisely, speak with power, and watch how your life starts answering back. Every morning before the sun even touched the windows, Emily would walk into her bathroom, still half asleep, shoulders slouched, eyes heavy. She wasn't thinking about greatness. She wasn't visualizing a success. She was just trying to survive the next hour. Her job drained her. Her confidence cracked every time she opened Instagram, and her dreams felt like stories she used to believe in when she was younger. But one morning something changed, not because someone motivated her, not because something external improved, but because she finally asked herself one question. What would happen if I started speaking to myself like someone I respected? Not hyping myself up, not pretending, but actually looking myself in the mirror and telling the truth about who I am, what I want, and what I'm no longer going to tolerate. You see, what Emily discovered, and what most people never realize, is that the mirror doesn't just reflect your face, it reflects your standard. It reflects what you allow. It reflects what you're willing to become. And if you spent years brushing your teeth while avoiding your own gaze, waking up just to scroll through other people's lives, then this next habit might be the interruption you didn't know you needed. Let me ask you something. What's the first voice you hear every morning? Is it yours, or is it notifications, to-do lists, old memories, creeping self-doubt disguised as logic? Do you walk past the mirror like a stranger, or do you meet yourself like a leader preparing for battle? Because if you knew the power of that first glance, that first sentence, you would never leave it to chance again. This is where the ritual begins. I call it the morning mirror command. It's not about affirmations for the sake of motivation. It's about looking into your own eyes and speaking with direction, because your subconscious doesn't need more hype. It needs orders, it needs vision, it needs repetition. And when you speak to yourself with command and clarity in the mirror daily, deliberately, decisively, you begin to shift the way you show up in the world. Here's how it works. Every morning before you touch your phone, before you answer to the world, you answer to yourself. You look in the mirror, not at your skin, not at your flaws, but at your eyes, the windows of your commitment. You say 3 things. 1, who you are becoming. 2, what you are choosing today. 3, and what you refuse to tolerate moving forward. Emily's words: I am a builder. I am choosing peace and precision today, and I refuse to shrink to make others comfortable. That was it. 3 lines. But those words became her morning armor. Over time, they didn't just echo, they rewired, because what you speak repeatedly, you start to believe, and what you believe, you begin to act on, and what you act on becomes your new identity. Let's be clear, this isn't magic, it's not mystical, it's neurological, it's repetition-based identity building. And if you still think it sounds cheesy, I'd ask you, how long are you willing to keep losing to the voice that tells you you're not enough? Because if you don't install a new internal leader, the old voice will stay in charge. And that voice, if left unchecked, will steal opportunities, damage relationships, and kill momentum without you even realizing it. That's the warning. Most people don't lose to failure. They lose to internal hesitation that was trained by their own self-talk. But this mirror ritual flips the training. It breaks the cycle, because when you speak to yourself with clarity, when you look into your own reflection with honesty and strength, something ancient inside you activates. The inner leader steps forward. The noise fades, and for a few seconds every morning you become aligned again, not with who the world told you to be, but with who you decided to become. So I want you to try this, and I want you to commit to it for 3 days. Wake up, no phone. Go to the mirror, look into your eyes and declare your identity, your intention and your boundary. Speak it clearly, not softly, not half-heartedly, like someone who means it. And yes, it'll feel weird at first. That's because you've spent years being silent, but the voice will come back. Your power will return, the version of you who leads will begin to take root, and the best part, the world will begin to notice. People will feel something different in your presence, even if they can't explain it. That's because your energy will no longer be driven by reaction. It will be anchored by intention. You won't just walk differently. You'll decide differently. You'll protect your focus. You'll attract what aligns, and you'll stop apologizing for taking up space in rooms you were born to lead. That's what happens when you stop avoiding your own reflection. That's what happens when you learn to command yourself before the world commands your attention. So here's your transition. When this video ends, you're going to go to the mirror and you're going to speak to yourself like someone you trust, someone you admire, someone who is building something no one else can see yet, because that someone is already in you, waiting for you to speak them to life. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need motivation. You need direction. And that direction begins the moment you start talking to yourself like your future depends on it, because it does. Michael stood behind the curtained palms, damp stomach, twisted heart pounding like a war drum. 30 seconds before his name would be called. 30 seconds before he'd face an audience of 200 investors waiting to hear his pitch. A moment he had visualized for months, but now felt paralyzed to walk into. The voice in his head wasn't cheering. It was whispering, doubt digging up every past failure, reminding him of every awkward moment, every time he froze, every time he came up short. What if they laugh? What if I choke? What if I'm just not built for this? That voice, it wasn't new, it was old familiar, practiced. And in that moment, Michael had a choice: either let fear narrate the moment or interrupt it with a new command. He closed his eyes, took one breath, and said quietly but firmly to himself, "You're not here to impress, and you're here to deliver. You earned this moment, now lead." And that was it. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched, and when the curtain lifted, he walked forward, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he spoke louder than the fear. Let me ask you something. How many moments in your life have you handed over to fear without a fight? How many decisions have you delayed? Conversations you've avoided? Opportunities you've let slide? Because the voice in your head convinced you to wait until you felt ready. But what if readiness isn't the goal? What if fear isn't the enemy? What if fear is just the signal that you've arrived at the edge of expansion, and now your job is to speak yourself across it, because leaders don't wait for courage, they create it by using their voice. And I'm not talking about yelling, I'm not talking about fake confidence. I'm talking about the ability to step into fear and lead your nervous system like a general taking command of a battlefield. Because here's what no one tells you. Your brain is waiting for your instruction. It doesn't distinguish between fear and growth. It only follows the voice that speaks with the most certainty. And if you don't speak with authority, fear will. It will fill the silence. It will take the mic. It will guide your breath, your body, your behavior, unless you take it back. So when you feel fear, whether it's walking into a meeting, picking up the phone, walking on the stage, speaking your truth, pause, don't run, don't collapse. Speak, say something simple, something firm. We've been here before. This is how I grow, breathe, focus, lead. That's the tool I call the anchor, phrase one sentence short. Strong, repeatable, used in the fire, not before it. It becomes the new signal. It interrupts the spiral. It trains your body to associate fear, not with retreat, but with forward motion. Michael practiced this for weeks before that pitch, not in front of mirrors, but in daily moments of micro fear, when doubt crept in while writing emails, When he started second-guessing himself before pressing send, he would stop, breathe, and say, decide and deliver. That became his anchor. That became his leadership voice. And over time, it became more automatic than the fear. Understand, this fear isn't coming to destroy you. It's coming to confirm you're moving toward growth. It shows up at the gates of your next level, and your job isn't to erase it. Your job is to override it. Because if you can speak yourself through fear, you can lead yourself through anything. That's what the great ones do. Navy SEALs call it command breathing and internal regulation. Athletes call it pre-performance cueing. But people like you and me, we call it ownership. You speak. You decide, you move, and fear becomes background noise. But there is a danger in silence. When you say nothing, the old voice wins. The scared voice, the voice trained by years of rejection, trauma, comparison, humiliation. It's quick, it's sneaky, and it is deadly if left in charge. So here's the warning: if you don't learn to talk yourself through fear, fear will quietly talk you out of the life you were meant to live. The relationship, the business, the book, the opportunity gone. Not because you weren't capable, but because you didn't interrupt the story. So here's the shift. For the next 3 days, I want you to pay attention to the exact moment fear enters your system. And instead of collapsing, I want you to speak. Not after, during use your voice to stabilize your body. Use your words to give your brain something clear to follow. Pick an anchor phrase, write it, say it, own it, train it like a warrior sharpens a sword. Because life won't stop sending you intimidating moments, but you can stop showing up unarmed. Talk to yourself like someone who has been through the storm and decided to keep walking anyway. Talk like someone who knows the difference between pressure and purpose. Talk like someone who has earned their seat at the table, not because they're fearless, but because they're no longer silent. This is not just about getting through fear. This is about building a new identity, one built on trust, one built on courage, one that knows if fear shows up, I've got something to say. And what I say leads. Ryan didn't look like someone who struggled with self-worth. He had the suit, the smile, the schedule, but underneath all of it lived a quiet identity that whispered the same message every morning: you're still not enough. And it didn't matter how much he accomplished or how many people clapped for him. He always found a way to shrink when it counted, to pull back just before the breakthrough. Because deep down, his subconscious wasn't wired for success. It was wired for survival. It was running on an identity built years ago by repetition. That's what most people never understand. You don't become who you are because of one moment. You become who you are because of the words, thoughts, and emotions you rehearse over and over again. Identity is not a lightning bolt. It's a loop. And whatever you repeat long enough, with enough emotion, eventually becomes automatic. So, let me ask you, what phrases have you been rehearsing without realizing it? What labels have you worn so long they feel like personality, when really they were just repeated opinions spoken by others or whispered by your own fear? This is the truth. Most never confront the strongest force in the human psyche, is the need to remain consistent with how you see yourself. So, if you see yourself as average, you will sabotage anything that smells like greatness. If you see yourself as broken, you will reject love that feels too whole. If you see yourself as unworthy, you will dodge every spotlight until your life looks as small as your self-perception. But here's the breakthrough. Identity can be rewritten, not by accident, not by wishing, but by conscious repetition. You don't fix self-image with one quote. You fix it by training your subconscious like a sculptor-shaped stone. Repetition by repetition, stroke by stroke, and repetition requires ritual. For the next 3 days, I want you to build a new pattern, one that replaces noise with truth, hesitation with command, doubt with decision. You're going to record a 60-second audio, not for motivation, but for transformation. Your own voice, speaking your future identity in present tense. You will write it from the version of you that's already arrived, the one that moves with clarity, walks with purpose, and no longer negotiates with fear. And every night before your head hits the pillow, you will press play. Why? Because right before sleep, your brain enters a theta state, hyper-receptive, emotionally absorbent. This is when the subconscious is most open, most programmable, so what you feed, it becomes what you build. You don't fall asleep to noise anymore. You fall asleep to instruction, and you repeat this for 3 days, no skips, no excuses, because repetition isn't a technique. It's a decision to stay loyal to your next level, and that decision rewires how you think, how you speak, how you lead. Let me explain. why this matters. Every time you say, I am, your subconscious listens like it's gospel. I am tired. I am not good with people. I am just not that kind of person. Those phrases are not small. They're not harmless. They are instructions, and your identity will bend to obey them. That's why the most powerful phrase in the world is I am becoming, not because it's poetic, but because it creates space. Space between where you are and who you're allowed to grow into. And that space is where transformation lives. Ryan's phrase was simple. I am becoming the man who doesn't flinch. I am becoming the man who speaks with calm. I am becoming the man who finishes what he starts. And he didn't believe it at first. That's not the point. You're not repeating it because you believe it. You're repeating it until belief becomes automatic, until your nervous system responds with stability instead of panic, until your body feels safer in self-leadership than in self-sabotage. That's how you rewire identity, not through emotion, through rehearsal. And if you don't rehearse a new role, you'll default to the old one. And here's the danger. Most people spend their entire lives becoming a version of themselves they never chose, built by repetition. Repetition of criticism, repetition of silence, repetition of fear, disguised as logic, but not you, not anymore. You're going to break the loop. You're going to install a voice inside your mind that speaks direction louder than doubt. And that voice won't come from outside. It'll come from your own mouth, spoken, repeated, embodied. And when you do that, when you condition your identity daily, you stop waiting for motivation. You stop looking for validation. You begin to move differently, choose differently, decide faster, trust deeper. And the world starts to respond, not to who you were, but to who you repeatedly declared yourself to be. So, here's your final instruction tonight before you go to bed. Write your identity script. Begin every line with, I am becoming. Make it real. Make it honest. Make it powerful. Record it. Listen nightly. Speak it out loud. And remember, your future is not built on talent or timing. It's built on identity. And identity is built by what you rehearse when no one else is listening. So speak wisely. Repeat with intention and watch the old version of you get quieter while the leader inside you gets louder. That is the power of repetition. That is how you rewire your identity, and that is how you become undeniable. For the past few minutes, we've broken down the real reason most people never reach their next level, not because they're not smart enough, not because they don't work hard enough, but because they never learned how to lead their own voice, how to speak to themselves with clarity, with strength, with purpose. And now it's your turn, because this isn't just a motivational video. It's a blueprint for a 3-day transformation that rewires your identity from the inside out, and it starts right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now, because time is not your issue, your voice is. And you've just been handed the tools to reclaim it. So let's lock it in together one last time. Day 1, you track your inner dialogue, not just the loud statements, but the quiet assumptions, the small whispers that sabotage your momentum, and you write them down with honesty and no filter, because awareness is the first stage of power, and until you see what's there, you can't shift what's controlling you. Then day 2, you begin the interruption. You rewrite every phrase that limits you into a phrase that leads you, not in a fake, fluffy way, but in a grounded, identity-driven tone, that your nervous system can believe, that your subconscious can follow, that your future self can stand on like a foundation. And day 3, you elevate the practice. You step into your own leadership role by creating a command, ritual, mirror work, audio recordings, anchor phrases, and using your voice not as a reaction to life, but as a declaration to life. Because the world doesn't respond to potential, it responds to conviction. And conviction is what you hear when your inner voice finally sounds like someone who's already arrived, someone who doesn't beg for permission, someone who walks into rooms quietly powerful because they no longer need to prove. They simply proceed, and this is where your momentum begins. Because the moment you speak to yourself with direction, everything else starts moving in alignment. Your choices, your focus, your posture, your relationships, and most importantly, your belief. Because belief doesn't start when others see your progress. Belief starts when your own voice becomes your anchor, your reminder, your guide. And that's what this challenge is really about. It's not about fake positivity or temporary hype. It's about breaking the loop of silent self-sabotage and replacing it with a loud, deliberate decision to lead your thoughts. Like a general commands, a battlefield, no hesitation, no apology. Only presence, only clarity, only direction. So take the challenge seriously. Commit for 3 days. Speak like you've never spoken to yourself before. Write like your future depends on it. Record your identity script. Repeat your anchor phrases and build a version of yourself. So a line that fear, doubt, and distraction no longer have room to speak louder than your truth, because you are the voice that changes the course of your life, not your circumstances, not your past, not your critics, you. And if this hits something inside you, if you know this message wasn't just interesting but necessary, then drop it in the comments right now. Type the words, "I lead my voice," and let that be your first public act of internal power, your first spoken decision to own your narrative. And if you're serious about continuing this momentum, if you're ready for the full shift, then hit that subscribe button right now, because this is just day one. We've got more coming, deeper work, more tools, real strategies, and more rewiring to help you become the version of yourself that no longer flinches, that no longer waits, that no longer speaks like a victim of their past, but like the author of their future. Because you won't need the world to believe in you when you've already heard your own voice say, "I'm ready."